Here's the point of the conversation. Ed on KSFO is calling. Go ahead, please. What's on your mind, Ed?
Yes, Dr. Savage. My father's letter that I sent you was to implicate one of the things that power has been pushed in this country. And if
Hold on. This is the gentleman who sent me an anonymous letter. I did not ask for his call. It was a letter from a listener that came to me through a third party. He says his father was killed in the exact same way that Scalia was killed because he was a threat to the power structure in California. And you say he was killed, you think, by ethylene glycol or foxglove, correct?
That is correct. And as much investigation that we could do on this and the way that he...
Ed, please stay on the line for hour number 3. I must hear more about this on the Savage Nation. Savage Nation. In this hour, we're going to focus on the Scrophulariaceae. The what? The Scrophulariaceae. That's the figwort family that contains a very interesting plant known as digitalis, or foxglove, actually. Foxglove. Oh, it's a common garden plant, and you've heard the name digitalis. The most common one in your garden is digitalis purpurea. It's grown as an ornamental plant because of its beautiful flowers. And the shape of the bell-like flowers is very interesting in digitalis. And what it means is, think digitalis. It means it can fit over your digit, over your finger. That's where it came from. But the point of me talking about this particular botanical in the Scrophulariaceae is because it may be related to a political subject of the week, which is the strange death of a Supreme Court justice at a very obscure ranch with symptoms that could reflect the slight sprinkling of this member of the Scrophulariaceae upon his food. And joining us right now on the Savage Nation is an anonymous listener who sent me an email through a third party about the strange death of his father. Ed on KSFO, welcome back to the program. So your father was a very well-known water expert, right?
Yes, sir. He was even more than that. He had a Ph.D. in anthropology and was on the lecture circuit for not only for California, but for Wyoming, Idaho, and New Mexico.
And he was an expert on gold history. And his political enemies were who? Who were his political enemies?
His political enemies were right in the state of California in the House of Representatives. And many of the people that he was about to indict had to do with the gold transfer and the powers of the building of the railroad. And he was about to tell the real truth of the state of California and publish his book. And they stopped him from publishing that material. And
all right, but then you said he ate a meal. He died soon after, was found flat on his face in a motel room at a resort for prominent people in the state of California. We don't have to name the resort. What happened next, Ed?
Let's get the point here. He was giving a lecture. Within 20 minutes after eating his meal, he sat down for it. He said, "I don't feel good." Now, he was also an investigator in the state of California, so he carried quite a few licenses. And one of the things that he said to us children, he says, "I don't like coincidences." And I got to tell you, the coincidence between the way he died and Judge Scalia died is a coincidence. And it would only be 16 years between the death of him and Judge Scalia. That means these people are still alive and still active in their trade. And the idea that he was poisoned was by several experts. There was a doctor there at the assembly who took a look at him afterwards and felt that it was suspicious. And I will not give his name over the radio because it would bring suspicions up to him. But I will say that they felt that it was either digoxin or it was foxglove because of the death and the way he felt afterwards. And this is something that we have not been able to prove because of the cremation after his death. And he was
who decided to cremate your father?
The coroner. And
Without asking, without asking the family?
that's correct.
Oh my God! Wait a minute. What power does a coroner have to override a family? I didn't know that existed.
Well, sure it exists. They can make, within 48 hours of the death, they can have him cremated if they can't contact the wife or spouse. And at that time, she was out of town. But my brother was contacted, and by that time, he had already been sent to the crematory. Now, whose orders was that? That's the question that we're not able to follow up. But it had to be somebody definitely that was in power over the coroner that mandated it.
And where in California, which county did that occur in?
That was recorded in Willits, California.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Which county?
The city of Willits.
Oh, Willits. So you are suspicious of Justice Scalia's death, is what the point of this discussion is, correct?
Yes, sir, I am. And I will tell you, I worked in the food service, in the industry, both serving alcoholic beverages, and I was a chef for over 30 years. I've worked for the government and served the Pentagon boys and the President's boys. And I will tell you, there's a saying that goes around, don't piss off your chef. It's easy to pass on toxins in foods if someone's angry at you.
So you said it's your suspicion that your father had been poisoned by digoxin or ethyl glycol. And then you said foxglove is easily sprayed on food. Now, foxglove, in which form can it be sprayed on food?
In a liquid form. It could be put in a basis of alcohol, made in a tincture, and very easily sprayed on a salad, and can take somebody out in a few minutes. It's not.
And you said the symptoms are very similar to the symptoms described about Mr. Scalia.
Yes, they are.
Is that they don't feel well after they eat, but they're able to get up and walk to a bed, for example. Isn't that what you're saying?
Well, they were both flat on the floor when they were found.
No, I thought that Mr. Scalia was found on his bed, not on the floor.
Yeah, paralysis had already set in. Yeah.
No, but the report was he was found on his bed with a pillow behind his head, over his head, but he was in his bed.
Well, I'll tell you, my father was found flat on the floor. He just opened the door to the room, and that was it. And
yes, but Mr. Scalia was found on his bed lying down. Let's put the pillow aside, without any wrinkles on his clothing or on the bed sheets, which indicates what to you?
that he had paralysis.
And somebody helped him lie down on the bed?
I doubt it. I think he walked right over and totally went out. Because once you're exposed to this, you're not going to be able to move within 20 minutes. That's going to be it. Your heart's going to...
All right. Now, you said if a blood analysis had been done soon after death using a gas spectrometer, the chemicals residue would show up, correct?
Correct.
But if no one is looking for it, you're right, no one would notice the difference except for one thing. The patient's or the deceased's eyes would remain dilated. So if there had been a doctor present or had been called, or a coroner who was not corrupt had been called, the coroner could have seen dilated pupils and noted that, correct?
Correct.
But there was no coroner. Instead, they found an uneducated dolt of a local justice who said myocardial infarction and couldn't even pronounce the words. Remember us playing that soundbite?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, this was no joke. It's indicative of the fact that this is right out of A Touch of Evil. I mean, this is a movie that Orson Welles could do. And yet, no one is talking about this, Ed. At the very least, shouldn't there have been some attempt to allay some suspicions instead of dismissing them all as conspiracy theories by nuts?
They still have the body of Scalia. If they really wanted to do analysis, they could.
Oh, boy. Oh, you mean the eyes would still be dilated?
No, the eyes dilation is only going to last for about 2 hours, and then the eyes are going to go back to normal.
All right, so what would they be able to find since they've already performed a horrendous procedure on Mr. Scalia's body, God rest his soul? They've already mutilated it.
Well, if they had bothered to take any kind of samples of his intestinal tract or a blood analysis, like I said, a spectrometer would show that and show the chemicals in his blood, and it would show it in his hair. So
there would be a hair analysis, even at this late date. A week later, a hair analysis might show the residue of a chemical.
Certainly show glycol at the root of the hair, because it would pass.
And yet there's been no call for this. But what do you make of the fact that his son said, "Leave us alone. We're happy with not happy with. We're satisfied it was natural causes. There's no need for an investigation." What do you think that's about?
I think that's how you cover up a good murder.
So why would a family member suggest such a thing?
To keep the family from being involved in any kind of scandal or having the media at their front door. They're trying to cut the whole procedure down.
Do you think that it's cruel of me to even ask these questions, and because everyone else stopped asking them and they've moved on to important things such as Anderson Cooper asking Jeb Bush what his favorite music is? Isn't that what I should be doing as a talk show host? Talking about Jeb Bush's favorite music?
Dr. Savage, I believe, as you've had Trump on your radio, I do think this move is a move on the chessboard of the world chessboard to take somebody out that is very powerful, that represents the right side. And you know that the Supreme Court has to vote in the president.
The Supreme Court has to do what?
It has to get the approval of the Supreme Court to vote in the president.
What do you mean, after an election?
Well, just to get the election going, it has to be approved at the higher levels before he can even be allowed. Right now, Trump isn't even in a playing card other than in the public and doing announcements.
You're implying something else here, aren't you? You're implying a message to Donald Trump?
No, I believe that the far liberal left is trying to put a person in office other than a conservative.
Well, what would the Supreme Court have to do with the general election, though? I'm not following that.
Well, sure, Mr. Savage. You know that the Supreme Court makes a decision and approval of who is going to be in office and who is not going to be in office in their smoky rooms long before this conversation even goes to the public. And right now it's not before the public. All you're seeing is people on the microphones.
You mean they're the secret star chamber who selects the president?
That's the way it's been going ever since the Carter administration.
I didn't know about that one. Stay on the line for another minute or two. I want to ask a few questions. This is very disturbing. I'll be back in a moment.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. It's the only company I trust to protect my wealth. Call 800-BUICO, ACA on the Savage Nation. It's a botanical show, nothing to do with Supreme Court Justice Scalia's passing. We're talking about a plant in the Scrophulariaceae named foxglove, or you know it as the digitalis plant, or it's known by its popular name as, it's an ornamental plant. You've seen it in your garden. Common foxglove in plain English. So a gentleman sends me an email. I don't know him. Comes anonymously through a third party. And he says his father died under suspicious circumstances in the same way years ago. And he was a very important investigator who was about to blow the whistle on some politicians in California. In California. Are you with us, Ed? Welcome back to the Savage Nation.
Yes, I am.
Ed, you said something that I couldn't follow you. You said the Supreme Court secretly picks the candidates?
Yes, what I'm saying is the smoky back rooms do exist. And to make any kind of agreement who they're going to select, to put their candidate up is done way outside, way before any kind of electoral process takes place. And
so how does is that why they hate Donald Trump? Because he wasn't in the smoky room?
Well, Donald Trump is not somebody who's been in politics. He's been just someone who's been in corporations. And he doesn't have any past as far as being a governor or any kind of official position in a state. And this is something that hold a legal title, he's going to have to make friends at very obscure places. And I believe that Scalia was one of those people that would be in his corner.
Interesting. So how do they pick a communist like Sanders, a lowlife like him, and let him beat Hillary Clinton so far? How does that happen?
I don't think Sanders is being picked. I think Sanders is qualified by his past situation as a previous governor of a state, and a state that is in very poor condition. If you follow,
well, he was. I don't think he was a governor. He was a senator, former mayor of a small city, and he won only by a squeaky margin. Do you think that the powers that be really want someone like him in the White House?
No, I think that they're trying to use this gentleman to not only make the show, but slow down Hillary.
No, I think they're using him to make Hillary look more centrist and more appealing.
That's what I just said.
But in any case, the bottom line to our discussion is your father, rest his soul, was an intelligent, highly educated man who was about to blow the whistle on some corruption in the state of California. He was invited to a meal at a resort for prominent people, and he died suspiciously like Scalia. That's the sum total, correct?
That's correct.
And you, as a former chef who worked in some very high places, believe it could have been foxglove or ethyl glycol, because the symptoms are similar. I mean, that's what you're saying, correct?
That's what I'm saying, either in a drink or in his salad. It would have to be a water-based salad in order to hold the molecules in place.
Well, you've made your point, Ed. My fear is, though, it's going to go nowhere, because although this program is heard worldwide, apparently we have a somnolent press that does hardly show any pulse whatsoever. We certainly have no investigative reporting, and there's no guts in the Republican Party to demand an investigation. So what might come of this? I don't know. Our only hope is Japanese, Chinese, Russian television. They come to America and demand answers. RT television should come to Texas and demand answers. When I was a kid, loved them. Such energy, such unbelievable manic energy. Died at 20 of a heroin overdose. Too much too soon. He rose too high too fast. The old story of the feathers and the wax getting too close to the sun. Which of our candidates is the myth of? Which is that myth? You know, my mind is not working 100% right now. It's a V12 running on 11 cylinders right now. Which is the myth? The Greek myth. It's not Sisyphus where he rolls the rock up the hill, labors it up the hill only to see it roll down the other side, and then has to roll it back up the hill again and to see it roll down the other side through eternity. That's the myth of Sisyphus. That's talk radio hosts. We roll the boulder up the hill every day, and then we watch it roll down the hill, and the next day we get up, we have to roll the boulder up the hill. But some of us are made for it. It's that simple. We're made to roll boulders up hills and watch them roll down the other side for eternity. It's like breaking rocks. You have to be made for this work. What's the myth where they fly too close to the sun? It's not Sisyphus. Robert, do you know? With the wax wings. What? Now look it up. It's not that guy. Do you want to talk about the thing already? Or the transgendered at the CIA, or this is what I didn't get to yet. This is a good one. This you're not going to believe. I found this on an obscure website. The time Allen Ginsberg wrote a socialist poem about Bernie Sanders. You're not going to believe this one. It was I don't know what site it was on, some left-wing newspaper. Last June, while digging through 50 boxes of archival material about Bernie Sanders' 4 terms as the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, a reporter for the British newspaper The Guardian found a poem by Allen Ginsberg written by hand on a 1986 visit to the city. Burlington Snow didn't name Sanders, but he was clearly the populist muse that inspired it. And then he wrote this wonderful poem about him. And the ugliness of this is that Ginsberg was a well-known supporter of NAMBLA, North American Man-Boy Love Association. And here's a Jewish newspaper. Now remember, The Forward, which is a socialist Jewish newspaper, is glorifying Ginsberg and glorifying Bernie Sanders. Why? Because they were both socialists. Can you believe that they haven't changed at all? The Forwards was originally written for immigrant Jews just off the boat, and it was extremely socialistic and left-wing. And they're still in business, if you can believe this, selling to 14 people on the Upper West Side who are all millionaires who still think they're socialists. And they all have summer homes in Burlington, Vermont, where Bernie Sanders is from. Pretty amazing. So, yeah, and this is an interesting little story. And they said they don't think that Sanders would want to have this poem published right now because the poem praises the socialist tradition that they're seeing in Bernie Sanders. And nobody would have predicted that Sanders would be waging such an effective campaign to move the Democratic Party in a more progressive direction. Whenever you hear the word progressive, reach for your Glock. It means they're coming for your guns, your wife, and your family, the way the ex-Soviets did. That's what the word progressive means. It means they're coming to get you. They're coming to take away everything you've worked for your whole life. They're regressives. They're from Stonehenge. But they don't think Sanders is going to want this poem published because he was too tied into the NAMBLA movement, North American Man-Boy Love Association, and they don't think that would be good for Sanders' campaign. We'll have to wait and see whether Sanders' people will like to glorify. Who knows? It could work for him today. They're looking for transgenders at the CIA. Who knows what could happen tomorrow? We don't know what this country can be in a day. Let's take some calls. WDRC, Connecticut. Mike, welcome. What's the topic? Go ahead, please.
Hi, Dr. Savage. How are you?
What's up?
I do regret to inform you that, in my professional opinion, from reading the obituary and the services for Dr. Scalia, I feel that he's going to be cremated. That's the way that it reads. They wouldn't announce...
Are you the funeral director who called yesterday and said in all your years you've never heard of a hearse going to pick up a body? It's usually a medical examiner?
True. And that hearse took him came from an hour away, and then took him in the other direction to El Paso, which is about 3 hours away for the embalming. The way that it reads is that there is going to be a burial, and that is private. If they wanted anything to be private that people were going to go and watch, it would be the actual him lying in repose. There are people standing outside in the cold to wait for that.
Well, that's what they're doing right now. They just did that. They did the lying in repose today in Washington with a closed casket.
So they're saying a burial at a later...
Why was the casket closed? Is that typical for a public figure, a closed casket?
Not usually. Maybe there was a private viewing, though, from the family. Maybe.
Yeah, but what's the whole point of people procession going by and looking? They want to see a casket. They can go to a casket manufacturer. I mean, they're going to say goodbye to a great man. Don't they want to see the man, his corpse?
Sure, that's part of the whole closure process, which, most popes or any figure is pretty much lies in repose, and it is open usually. The casket is usually open, correct.
So I was surprised that it was a closed casket when they're looking at wood, basically looking at chestnut. What do they make caskets out of today, by the way?
That casket was made out of wood. That was probably made out of either solid oak or mahogany or cherry. It could be stained.
Well, that's nice. They're very traditional. At least it wasn't reprocessed sawdust chippings from a bamboo factory to keep in the green theme.